So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to get started. Okay, so we will have a Q&A at the end in case people have questions. Okay, so this website here, we have a new website. Temple went from Drupal 7 to Drupal 10, and they also moved us under global engagement. So it has been a time of flux for our website, but it's getting better. So this is our website specifically for departments that are trying to bring people in. And on that site, it will have links to a lot of the forms that you will need as part of an H-1B petition or really a lot of petitions. Here are some sample letters on that same page and some useful links. So actually starting today, I believe, was the final day of USCIS accepting checks for any petitions. So starting today, either we use a G1450, which is for if you have a purchasing / credit card, or a G1650, which is, you have to provide a bank account, a routing number, and that form looks like this. We have not had anyone use this so far. There was talk that the health system was going to, but I haven't had anything. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're hoping at some point to file an H-1B petition, you're going to have to either find someone's credit card or you're going to have to give them this information. In general, these are the steps of the H-1B application process. So the department begins an application in DESTI1. They invite the applicant to complete their sections. The department sends the correct fees, however, and also a controlled tech form to us. Someone, usually it's going to be HR up there, has to complete and email me an actual wage form. The department's going to submit a completed application. And then, in theory, we begin the LCA process, and it requires at least 7 days for an LCA to be certified. Then we begin preparing the H-1B petition. When it's ready, we submit it to immigration. Most of the time, we're going to be submitting new petitions with premium processing because current processing times are 7.5 months. So just keep that in mind. If we're submitting it online, we should get a receipt right away. If we're filing it on paper, then usually we get the receipt notice within 2 weeks. And then once the petition is approved, I will let the department, HR, and the applicant know when we get the notices. Important to know that if someone voluntarily leaves Temple, you have to let me know. And we will withdraw our H-1B petition. If someone is being terminated, it is really critical that you tell me right away. I will withdraw our H-1B petition along with the LCA. If you don't let me know that this person has been terminated, we can be liable for back pay. So you have to let me know. Also, just so you know, if someone is being terminated prior to the end date on their H-1B approval notice, the department is responsible for the cost of return transportation. And so that's something we would go over that process to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do. Unfortunately, there is a government shutdown and things are not operating up to par. So USCIS is operating because they are self-funded. However, they could have some people furloughed. You never know. So they could be slowing down. Department of State, they are the ones responsible for visa issuance. It's possible that there are people being furloughed, and so people applying for visas might experience some problems. The port of entry, probably everything's going to be okay. And ICE seems to be doing just fine. Okay, then we have the Department of Labor, and they are critical for LCAs. So we cannot file any LCAs right now, and I can't even try to figure out a prevailing wage because their whole website is down. So this means we can't do anything with H-1Bs at the moment. Okay. Joan, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. This is you.
Hold on. Okay, so the USCIS H-1B proclamation is a fee, $100,000 fee that anyone, if we do get to file an H, for anyone who is outside the US, we also have to prove that we have either paid that $100,000 fee or that we have applied for and been granted an exception for the $100,000 fee. So far in the whole United States, a whopping 0 extensions have been applied for or granted. So we don't know whether or not there will be any kind of an exception granted, or how long it would take to get one if we do apply for one. So the petitions requesting consular notification, port of entry, pre-flight inspection are all subject to this fee. So basically that means anyone who is already outside the US or anyone who is in the US, we filed an application for a change of status, an amendment, or an extension of stay, and USCIS determines that the individual is not eligible for the change of status or amendment. So what would generally happen there is, let's say, a change of status from a status non-immigrant F1. So let's say someone is in the US on optional practical training, and we file an application for a change of status, and this happens pretty frequently. During the adjudication process, it's determined by USCIS that the person's not maintaining their status. And this could be simply that USCIS thinks that, or sees that the person had accrued too many days of unemployment. So what they could say is, you can have the H, but you need to leave the US and come back. So that's used to not be a huge issue. I mean, it was still somewhat of an issue, but now it's much bigger because that person now, instead of doing a change of status and not being subject to the fee, is now the person who's going to travel outside the US, come back, and they're now subject to the fee. Do excuse me for just 1 second. So, like normally the change of status is not an application that's going to be affected. But if they have to travel, it will be. Can you do the next slide, Sharon?
Sure. Okay. So ones that will not be affected by the proclamation. So if someone's currently in the United States with a valid H-1B visa, they're okay. Any petition submitted before September 21st, 2025, and any petitions that we file now that are an amendment, change of status, or extension of stay inside the United States, they will not have to worry about the $100,000 fee. So
And it's,
people who
sorry
are
to
in the
interrupt.
US,
What?
I was
Sorry
just,
to interrupt, but I can come back. I separated the pups, and B, um, there's a bunch of lawsuits, and someone who from legal counsel that we work with at Temple's legal counsel said that this possibly could even go into like not being not it might not be a thing in a couple weeks, but that's maybe that's but as of now we have to act on the information we have presently, and like I said, the lawsuits that are pending could make this go away.
let's hope.
Yeah. Yeah, we've I always tend to cover the slides before we get to them, but this is another thing about how to pay the fee and what the exceptions are. So the exceptions are no US workers, um, in the national interest, and the person's presence in the US is not going to cause any security warnings, security concerns while they're in the US.
So another initiative going on is the Department of Labor announced something called Project Firewall, which basically is ramping up investigations into employer compliance with the LCA. So if the Department of Labor has any reason to believe that there is non-compliance, the secretary themselves can be in charge of these investigations. This is new. And basically, it's supposed to make sure that that employers are doing what they're supposed to do. So it's very important that whatever we filed an H-1B petition for, so if the job, is a grant analyst, let's say, then the work they have to be doing is a grant analyst. The LCA has to reflect a grant analyst. And of course, that has to be their job in HR. So everything should match, if you will. The one before it is also really important. It's something called benching. And basically, that is if you're supposed to be paying an H-1B worker, but for whatever reason, the employer doesn't have work or the person doesn't have a license or whatever, you bench them, which means you don't pay them even though you're supposed to be. That's always been a very big concern, but it is really now a very big concern because if that person notifies the Department of Labor that they're being benched, there could be huge consequences for that. So at no point should anybody be putting anyone, through a situation where they're not getting paid unless the H-1B worker themselves has applied for, let's say, a leave of absence. Like it's voluntary. They wanted it. Maybe they're having a baby, whatever. That's okay. But employer imposing the no salary, that's a problem. Obviously, we want to keep all our record keeping, our posting requirements, and our workplace practices in line with whatever we said is happening in the H-1B petition. So again, everything has to fully align. If we're saying that someone should be earning $100,000 a year, then they really better be earning $100,000 a year. If they have like a small promotion because it's a new year, that's fine. Like getting more than what we said, if it's a small amount, is fine. But if they move to a different position, that's an issue because then we need to file a new H-1B amendment. And unfortunately, we can't file anything right now because of the shutdown. Okay, so moving on, an alternative to an H-1B for someone who is outstanding in their field. They have to be at the top of their field. An O-1 would be someone that we would talk to an attorney and see if they think this person has a good case. Temple works with Emily Cohen and Clasco to determine if an O-1 is an option, and they would file it for us. So just keep in mind, perhaps it might be an option. Another possibility is trade NAFTA, TN. It's only for Mexican and Canadian nationals, and there are specific jobs that qualify. So, for instance, maybe a medical laboratory technologist or a pharmacist. There's very specific ones. So, if you are going to hire a Canadian or Mexican national, we could look to see if TN is an option. If the person is outside the US, they can go to a US border and apply directly there. Keep in mind, Mexican nationals need to get a visa first. Canadians do not need a US visa. Only ISS staff are permitted to sign a TN employment support letter, and you would do a TN application in Destiny 1. One other option we like to let people know is for Australian nationals. It's just like an H-1B, but only for Australians. They still have to get an LCA. So unfortunately, with the government shutdown, we still can't bring in E3s either. But once the shutdown ends, if you have an Australian national, we can discuss the possibility. Okay, Gabby, J1s, this is you.
Hello. Okay, so this is just some information about bringing in J1 exchange visitors. So if you want to bring somebody to Temple Health or Fox Chase as a J1 exchange visitor and they are currently in the US in a different status, the departments will need to submit to us a completed J1 application online. And then once that's submitted and I issue the DS 2019, the applicant then needs to apply with USCIS for a change of status. And we do recommend doing this with premium processing. Without premium processing, it can take up to 12 months to be approved. But with premium processing, it's usually within 2 weeks to 1 month. The fee is listed on the screen, and the individual cannot begin working at Temple until they've received the physical I-539 approval notice to their change of status. And then just some information to note that the individual cannot be in J1 status if they hold a minimum of a bachelor's degree. That's not true for undergraduate student interns, but I don't think that Temple Health has had any of those before, so that doesn't really apply. Any permanent position, so like a tenure track or tenured faculty appointment, is not appropriate because the J1 visa is for a temporary position. If they're entering the US for a medical residency program or anything with clinical activities, we would not sponsor them as J1. Or if they have any intent to pursue permanent residency at their time of entry through a green card, because like I said before, the J1 visa is temporary. Okay, the next slide, please. So then once the J is finished with their up to 5 years of employment at Temple, this is just some information about how you can let me know that they're leaving or if they're leaving early as well. We need to update SEVIS to include their actual last day of working. And this is really just important for both our records and also for the individual in their future endeavors, because we want to make sure that we have the correct information and are reporting it to the government as the correct end date. But then in the future, if they go back to their home country, want to come back to the US in a different immigration status or as a J1 again, it's really important that the information is correct and that we have their correct end date. Okay, so then moving on to F1 OPT employment. So every international student in F1 status, once they graduate from a degree in the US, is eligible for between 1 and 3 years of OPT employment. And so they submit this application with the school that they graduated from. So ISSS here will create OPT recommendations for students who graduated from Temple. So if they apply with regular processing, it takes about 3 to 5 months for USCIS to approve this. And they'll send them a little plastic ID card called an employment authorization document, and that's what gives them the authorization to work in the US. They need this physical card in their hand to work. Sometimes they'll get their online approval notification 2 or 3 weeks before they have the physical card, but it's important that they have that card before they can work. And HR should usually ask for the EAD card to complete the I-9. When you're employing somebody and they have OPT sponsorship, you don't need to do a D1 application because they already have the sponsorship. And it's important to note that the OPT is employment based on the student graduating from a full-time course of study, and the employment needs to directly relate to what they graduated with. And like I said a little bit earlier, sometimes the OPT applications that ISSS creates are for people who are going to then go on to work at Temple. But if you're hiring someone and they have OPT authorization and they just graduated from Drexel, we're not going to be involved in that process at all, unless they potentially change status, and then we'll help. But all of the communication would be with their DSO at whatever school they graduated from. So here's some examples of employment that's allowed during the first 12-month period of post-completion OPT. And this is what all students who graduate from a full-time program are entitled to. So they can be paid. They have to work a minimum of 20 hours a week, but it can be part-time or full-time as long as it's a minimum of 20 hours per week. The job must be related to their field of study. They're also allowed to be unpaid during the initial 12-month period. But it's important to note that the volunteer position needs to be a true volunteer position, not something that an American worker would be paid for. And then, of course, they need to provide evidence from their employer that they were doing at least 20 hours per week of work during their time working there. And they are allowed to work for multiple employers, but all of the employment must be related to their field of study. And then this information is not the same for the STEM extension, which is on the next slide. So the most important thing that's different from before is that the STEM extension employment must be paid. So the employer needs to be enrolled in the E-Verify program, which not every employer is, and students will often ask how they can find out, and HR usually knows. And then the student supervisor, as well as the student themselves, need to work on the Form I-983 training plan together, which is just an outline of what they're making, what their start date was, what their job description is, and then a 6-month check-in, 12-month, and 18-month check-in that they then give to us or whoever's sponsoring them. And then we have some links here for instructions on how to complete the I-983, as well as a description on what it is. Like post-completion OPT, STEM OPT, you must be working 20 hours per week, but it does need to be paid, like I was saying before. And they can work for multiple employers at the same time, but it's a lot less common for STEM because the employer needs to be E-verified. And each position needs to be at least 20 hours per week. And at the time, at least this is how we do it at Temple, maybe other schools do it differently, but when we're recommending someone for STEM OPT, they need to be working for that E-verified STEM employer at the time that they submit the application. And then similar to post-completion OPT, all STEM OPT employment must be related to what they graduated from. And then finally, some information on administrative processing, which is becoming more and more common these days. So this is something that could potentially happen anytime an F1 student, J1 exchange visitor, H1B employee goes to renew their visa at a consulate abroad or just get their initial visa. But basically, they're at their visa appointment, and the Department of State determines that they need more security checks. So they need to take their application and review it for a longer period of time. Sometimes this happens if they don't make their social media profiles public. Other times it can just happen for other reasons. And on the website, it says this takes 4 to 6 weeks, but we've had plenty of instances where it's taken up to 9 or 10 months. So if this happens, then just let us know as soon as you hear about it. Usually the individuals are pretty good about letting us know that it's happening, but then we can try to develop a backup plan. But yeah, it's just this is a little bit about what it is, what it means, and why it may happen.
Okay, so we're going to open this up to questions. So people can uh, just unmute yourself if you have any questions.
I do have one question. I think, Gabby, you were talking about I think it was the F1, the OPT. So are we able to hire with a receipt and give them, do they have time to provide the EAD card?
So you can hire somebody and they can do the interview process before they have the EAD card in their hand. Their first day of work just can't be until they have the actual card in their hand. Does that make sense?
Okay, so we can't accept a receipt because sometimes there's certain things you can accept a receipt and they have a certain amount of days after they're hired.
Yeah, so that would
Right.
be if like theoretically for a STEM extension, that would be okay. I think, Joan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was okay maybe before, but we're operating under just being as conservative as possible
No,
because
it was never okay for OPT. When you apply for optional practical training, the students are allowed to pick dates. Like, say I'm graduating in December, I can pick any day between December, the day after I finish, and within 60 days. So I could get the receipt pretty quickly because you can even premium process the application for OPT. So I could get the receipt the same day, but I may not get the approval until 2 months later. And even if I do get the approval, the dates on the card may not be valid yet. Like if I decide to apply for premium processing of my OPT and I get the card and I ask for the employment in February to start, but I get the card in January, even with the receipt and with the card, I still can't work until February, the validity dates of the OPT. So, especially with OPT, you want to have the EAD card and see what dates it was actually approved for. You're thinking about the H because when we do an extension or a transfer, we can work with the receipt, but not OPT.
Okay. I was probably thinking about extensions too,
Nope.
mostly for me.
Extensions, transfers, you can take the H receipt. And with the STEM OPT, and you can see if you look at the authorization code on the EAD card, it's C3A, C3B, and C3C. So if you have a receipt that says, I think it says C3C on it, I'm like 99% sure.
Yes. Mhm.
That can actually, they can work for 180 days.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
Yeah, past the end date of the OPT. So there's a lot of cases where a receipt notice is good, but J work, J2 work authorization, H4, and OPT, the initial one, no.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Are you going to share these slides by any chance? Because
Yes.
they are very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Mhm. Um, Really? There's no other questions. That's wild. Okay.
I think it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
But thank you for putting this together. I think it's helpful, like overview. And I know um, every situation we're faced with is unique in its own way, and
Right.
you all are always so helpful in kind of shepherding us through that. So we do appreciate it, and I think it's helpful to have this overview. But I know for me, it feels like information overload. So
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, yeah, and we didn't give you everything.
I'm sure I was just scratching the
um,
surface, but
yeah,
thank you.
exactly. But obviously, if people have time and they're digesting it and they have questions, you can always email us or give us a call, and just we can go over it again. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take
Bye.
care, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. All right. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna end it unless you guys have anything else.
I thought we were going to talk about the H4 stuff.
Oh, are we doing that? Okay. I thought you meant after the staff meeting. But that's fine.
Either way.
Well, Holly, I don't know if you're there, but I hope you're not bored if you are listening. So I'm torn because I don't want to be a jerk about it. But on the other hand, I really like filing online, number one. Number two, I find often there's an expectation if I take in the H4 application that I'm going to review it, no matter how many times I say we don't do that. And of course, I've waited to submit petitions because people are like, oh, I'm working on the H4 EAD application. So I was thinking I understand for initial ones. What?
I
Oh,
just realized Gabby left.
what the? All right. Then
Never
let's
mind.
just talk about it
Yeah,
after
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
Holly's here and Gabby's not.
All right.
I saw
All
the
right.
three. Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll do it at the staff meeting.
All right, cool. All right,
Bye.
see you guys. All right, bye.